Before this story begins, listen closely. This is not just a story of crime. This is a story of silence, power, and the moment fear changed sides. If you're watching from any city around the world, comment below and tell us which city you're listening from. And if you enjoy dark, cinematic stories where the underworld meets fate, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us till the end. Now, let's enter the shadows. The city had settled into uneasy silence. The Orphan and Elena moved freely, unseen but always watching. Every syndicate knew better than to challenge them. Every corrupt official whispered their names in fear. But shadows have layers. A new presence emerged. Someone who didn't care about the Mafia or the underworld. Someone who thrived in chaos disguised as order. He called himself Damian Crow. No one knew his true origin. No one knew his resources. But everyone who met him, even briefly, felt the cold precision of a predator who never missed. Elena noticed it first. Networks she thought secure began flickering with activity. Small, calculated disturbances. No one ever claimed responsibility. "He's testing us," she said quietly. The Orphan's eyes didn't leave the city below. "Then we observe. Let him make the first mistake." Damian didn't reveal himself openly. His signature was subtle. A failed alliance here. A sudden betrayal there, whispers in dark corners. Yet, with each calculated move, the city's underworld began to shift. Small factions fell under his influence. Older crime lords who thought themselves untouchable suddenly grew cautious. The Orphan understood immediately. He didn't underestimate fear. He studied it. And Damian's fear was different. It wasn't born of anger or revenge. It was born of strategy and patience. Elena leaned over a glowing map. "We've seen syndicates, corrupt governments, even hidden councils. But this is different. He's everywhere." The Orphan nodded. "And nowhere. Exactly what makes him dangerous." Their first encounter wasn't in the streets or in a warehouse. It was in the networks. A single message appeared on every encrypted channel Elena controlled. "I know who you are. I've been waiting." Neither of them replied. Silence was their weapon. Over the following nights, Damian escalated. Not with attacks, but with challenges. Syndicates he didn't control were subtly nudged against them. Small operations went wrong. Trusted contacts hesitated. Each move tested the Orphan and Elena, probing weaknesses, observing reactions. The Orphan watched. "He's not trying to destroy us. He's trying to understand us. To predict us." Elena smirked slightly. "Then let's make sure he fails." And so the game began. Two unseen forces, shaping the underworld in silence. One had experience and instinct, the other patience and precision. Neither wanted to announce war yet. Both knew that in the shadows, victory is claimed before the first blow is struck. The city continued to breathe, unaware that a new player had entered the board. A rival who could match them step for step. And somewhere high above the streets, the Orphan and Elena prepared for the moment when they would finally meet him face to face. The city slept uneasily under the rain-soaked neon glow. Even in darkness it whispered stories. Stories of an orphan who had reshaped the underworld and a woman who had chosen shadows as her ally. But now a new presence had arrived, subtle and precise. Damian Crow. He was everywhere yet nowhere. His influence threaded through the city like a hidden current. Syndicates shifted slightly, small alliances faltered, and agents began disappearing quietly. Damian's moves were invisible to most, but not to them. Elena studied the networks, her fingers tracing lines of influence and interference. "He's probing again," she said, voice calm but tense. "Testing our instincts, our patience." The Orphan watched the city streets from the rooftop. Rain-slicked pavement reflected lights like broken mirrors. "Then we show him what patience looks like," he said. "We make him overreach." For the next week they laid subtle traps. False vulnerabilities, fictitious alliances, financial errors, all calculated, invisible to the untrained eye. Damian responded almost immediately. Minor factions moved, small operations went awry, and the city shifted imperceptibly. It was a dance of shadows, each side observing, each side adapting. Elena glanced at him one night. "He wants us to reveal ourselves." He thinks he can force a mistake. The orphan nodded. Then we give him the illusion of mistakes. And that is exactly what they did. Over several nights they planted controlled vulnerabilities. Every minor attack by Damien's proxies was carefully manipulated, creating confusion and forcing him to react. Slowly, the orphan and Elena began mapping his network, learning his methods. Then the message came, singular and clear. You understand nothing. Meet me where no one can see. The orphan and Elena prepared. Every route, every approach, every surveillance system was secured. The location was revealed. An abandoned metro station on the city's edge, long forgotten, buried under layers of rusted rails and broken platforms. They moved through the tunnels silently. Every step was measured. Their presence alone altered the balance of the city, though no one else knew it. You finally came, Damien said, emerging from the shadows. Calm, controlled. A predator assessing prey that it had yet to strike. The orphan's stance was relaxed, deliberate. Elena's hand hovered near her tablet, ready to manipulate triggers or observation systems at a moment's notice. You underestimate me, Damien said. You think your games matter. We don't play games, the orphan replied. We survive and adapt. Elena's voice was sharp. We don't play games either. We bend the city to those who endure. Damien's smile deepened. Then let the observation begin. The next hours were a silent war. No weapons drawn. No explosions. Just calculation, observation, and positioning. Every movement was deliberate. Every pause a test of patience. The orphan and Elena measured Damien's rhythm, analyzing his timing, reactions, and thought patterns. By dawn, the encounter ended without violence. Damien retreated, leaving no trace but a single message. Interesting. The game is just beginning. Elena glanced at the orphan. He's patient. He won't make a mistake quickly. The orphan nodded. Then neither will we. Let him wait. Over the following days, subtle conflicts escalated across the city. Damien manipulated minor criminal factions to destabilize controlled operations. Yet every move was countered with quiet precision. The orphan and Elena did not act openly. They were shadows moving the pieces, redirecting forces before the consequences could manifest. Through observation, they began identifying cracks in Damien's operations. Small human errors, patterns that repeated under pressure. Each discovery became a plan, each plan a strategy to counteract his influence. Elena studied him relentlessly. Even the best strategist slips, she said softly. The orphan's eyes scanned the horizon. Then we wait for that moment. The city itself became a battlefield of influence. Business deals, minor crimes, and political moves were all subtly affected by three unseen forces. The orphan and Elena worked to maintain control without exposing themselves, while Damien continued to probe, searching for weaknesses. The first real confrontation loomed on the horizon. They knew Damien would not strike recklessly. He would wait, test, and observe until the moment he believed he had the advantage. And when that moment came, the orphan and Elena would be ready. The orphan looked at Elena one evening, standing on a rooftop with rain falling softly. He's not just a rival. He's a teacher in patience and danger. Elena smiled faintly. Then we let him teach himself a lesson. The city continued its unaware rhythm, but underneath, everything had changed. A new shadow moved among the old ones. A rival as calculated, patient, and dangerous as the orphan and Elena themselves. The game had evolved, and the city would never be the same again. The days after the observatory encounter were quiet, but tense. The orphan and Elena moved through the city like shadows, aware that Damien had not retreated, but rather, was recalculating. Every minor faction, every syndicate, every criminal network shifted slightly, too subtle for the untrained eye, but clear to them. Elena leaned over the glowing tablet one night. He's probing, testing how fast we react, trying to predict our instincts. The orphan didn't respond immediately. He watched the streets below. Then we give him something unexpected. Not a trap, an opportunity he won't see coming. They began planting subtle false leads, financial errors, minor vulnerabilities, fictitious alliances. Nothing violent, nothing blatant. Just breadcrumbs. Every breadcrumb was designed to draw Damien's attention. And he took it. Within hours, anomalies began appearing. Supply routes disrupted. Messages misrouted. Small factions appeared to make moves that were ultimately meaningless. But to Damien, these signs were enough to indicate progress. The Orphan studied the pattern. He's trying to force us into action, to test our boundaries. Elena nodded. Patience. That's our advantage. A week later, a new message appeared. It was simple. Impressive. But you cannot hide from everything. The city will reveal itself. Elena's eyes narrowed. He wants us to overcommit, to expose ourselves. He believes he can manipulate us. The Orphan's lips curved into a faint smile. Then let's see who manipulates whom. They began to move more boldly, testing Damien's responses. Operations that had previously been safe were now exposed, but only in ways they controlled. Every movement was measured. Every reaction anticipated. And Damien responded in kind. Small attacks, minor sabotage, the occasional appearance of agents. Never enough to threaten them directly, but enough to maintain constant pressure. One night, the Orphan and Elena were observing a key syndicate meeting in the city's heart. Every move he makes is precise, Elena whispered. He's shaping the city like a chessboard, forcing pieces where he wants them. The Orphan's gaze was cold. Then it's time we become the unseen hand. They began infiltrating the edges of Damien's influence. Not with force, but with strategy. False alliances, controlled leaks, subtle manipulations. Every small victory revealed more of his network. Every exposed weakness became a clue, gradually constructing a map of his operations. Elena monitored the data relentlessly. He's meticulous. Every faction he touches moves like clockwork. He leaves no mistakes. The Orphan's eyes scanned the skyline. No one leaves no mistakes. Patterns always emerge. Even the best strategist eventually slips. Their first direct confrontation came unexpectedly. A minor syndicate, previously under Damien's influence, turned against him. Not out of courage, but because of the subtle manipulations the Orphan and Elena had orchestrated. Damien appeared personally, not physically, but through intercepted communications, angrily coordinating his response. You think this is a game? His voice crackled over the encrypted network. The Orphan responded calmly, we don't play games. We survive and adapt. Over the following days, the city became a stage of subtle warfare. No shots were fired openly. No one knew the true players. But the balance of power shifted quietly. Every faction aligned, realigned, and fractured again. Damien's influence was challenged for the first time. He realized the Orphan and Elena were not merely reactive. They were proactive, dictating the flow rather than responding to it. Elena glanced at the Orphan one evening. Rain dripping from the rooftop above. We're pushing him to overreach. Soon he'll reveal himself. The Orphan's gaze was steady. Then we'll be ready. The first face-to-face meeting was inevitable. Damien arranged a neutral location. A disused metro station on the edge of the city, abandoned for decades, hidden beneath layers of forgotten tunnels. He wanted to test them, gauge their reactions, and assert control. Elena and the Orphan arrived quietly, moving through shadows, surveying the empty tracks. The distant sound of dripping water echoed through the tunnels. You finally came. Damien's voice emerged from the darkness. Calm. Controlled. A predator assessing two prey it cannot yet strike. The Orphan's stance was relaxed, silent, unyielding. Elena's hand hovered near her tablet, ready to manipulate systems, triggers, or surveillance at a moment's notice. You underestimate me, Damien said, stepping fully into the dim light. His eyes scanned them both carefully, searching for hesitation. You think your games have power. You think you can predict me. The Orphan's voice was quiet but sharp. We don't predict. We observe. And we act. Elena's lips curled into a faint smile. We don't play games either. We survive, and the city bends to those who endure. The tension in the tunnels was palpable. No movement. No sound, save the water dripping from broken pipes. Each of them understood the stakes. A single wrong step could escalate into chaos, but none of them wanted that. Not yet. Damien circled them slowly, like a predator testing its prey. You're clever, I'll give you that. But cleverness without reach is meaningless. Elena's eyes gleamed. Reach isn't everything. Timing is. The orphan took a step forward, measured, deliberate. And patience. Damien paused, as if considering the statement. Then he smiled faintly, a smile that suggested respect, and perhaps even curiosity. Then let the dance continue. Over the next days, the rivalry intensified without open conflict. Damien began targeting the city's economic undercurrents subtly, manipulating key factions to pressure the orphan and Elena indirectly. Elena responded by creating controlled collapses, destabilizing his moves before they could materialize. They were locked in a battle of shadows, each anticipating the other's actions, each probing for weakness. The city itself became a chessboard, invisible to the rest of the world, with the two sides moving silently among the pieces. The orphan and Elena discovered cracks in Damien's operation. Small, overlooked details, human errors, patterns emerging in the way he handled communications. They prepared to exploit these imperfections, but cautiously. Damien was a rival worthy of patience, not haste. And through it all, the city continued its ignorant rhythm, unaware that every corner, every alley, every corporate office and abandoned warehouse was part of a silent war between three unseen forces. The orphan, Elena, and Damien Crow. The city never slept. It whispered. Rain slid down broken streetlights as neon signs flickered over alleys where power lived without names. Somewhere between abandoned buildings and luxury towers, the underworld ruled in silence. He had no family, no history anyone cared to remember. People called him the orphan because it was easier than asking where he came from. Beside him walked Elena, calm, precise, dangerous in ways most men never understood. She wasn't protection. She was purpose. Tonight wasn't about survival. Tonight was about changing the balance. Elena had once lived behind numbers and screens, cleaning money for men she never saw, until the Mafia burned her past to protect their future. She didn't cry. She adapted. Where others sought revenge, she built strategy. Where others carried guns, she carried endings. When she chose the orphan, it wasn't out of sympathy. It was recognition. Two broken systems recognizing each other. The restaurant looked untouchable. Crystal lights, marble floors, armed men hiding behind polite smiles. At the center sat the Mafia king, relaxed, certain the world bent for him. The room fell silent when the orphan and Elena entered without invitation. The Mafia king smiled. Do you know where you are? The orphan answered calmly. Where lies feel safe. Elena reached for the switch. Darkness swallowed the room. Glass shattered. Panic exploded. But it wasn't chaos, it was design. When the lights returned, bodies lay still, guns untouched. The Mafia king was breathing hard on his knees. The orphan leaned close. You built your empire on forgotten people. Tonight they remember. Elena placed a small drive on the table. Every secret. Every name. They left him alive. Broken was worse than dead. By morning the city changed. Accounts froze. Judges vanished. Empires collapsed without explanation. No one spoke their names, but everyone felt their presence. From rooftops and shadows, they watched panic spread upward. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was replacement. The underworld answered the only way it knew how, with hunters, snipers, crews. Contracts whispered across continents. Elena saw the reflection before the shot. The bullet missed. An explosion erased the shooter's floor seconds later. She lowered the detonator calmly. Never aim at ghosts, she said. One night, she finally asked the question. He told her about basements, institutions, children trained to obey fear, about learning silence to survive, about being expected to disappear. Elena listened without interrupting. Then she said, Then we end what made you. For the first time he smiled. A name surfaced from the deepest networks. Victor Hale. Former intelligence. Architect of controlled fear. He knew the orphan's face. His number. His origin. The truth cut deeper than bullets. He hadn't escaped by accident. He was unfinished. Victor didn't hide. He invited them underground. Lights activated as they descended. You could have ruled everything, Victor said from behind glass. All you had to do was stay broken. The orphan replied, You taught me fear. You never taught me meaning. Elena triggered lockdown. Sirens screamed. The choice wasn't destruction. It was exposure. Secrets flooded the world. Experiments. Silence. Government complicity. Victor Hale was arrested before dawn. For the first time, the orphan wasn't hunted. He was heard. Freedom felt wrong. Eyes followed them in crowds. Networks slowed. Warnings arrived. You broke a rule, one message said. Elena deleted it. They're afraid others might copy us. The orphan nodded. Then someone will try to erase us. The signal came without violence. Entire systems went dark. One symbol appeared. A black crown. Not Mafia. Not government. Custodians of outcomes. A ceiling few ever saw. They didn't run. They climbed. Into influence. Into daylight. Into systems that pretended to be clean. Elena smiled sharply. We don't destroy the board. We replace the players. The orphan typed the reply himself. I was born where you hide. The world still doesn't understand what happened next. It thinks monsters come from power. They don't. They come from survival. And somewhere beyond borders and headlines, an orphan and a woman who chose darkness weren't ruling the world. They were making sure it could never break children quietly again. The city never fully recovered. Streets moved quietly, whispers of the orphan and Elena haunting every corridor. Even the smallest syndicate trembled before their reputation. Governments denied everything, but some agents knew better. Every move they made, every alliance they broke, left a ripple that no one could ignore. Elena scanned the horizon nightly, analyzing patterns invisible to the untrained eye. No one had predicted their method. No one had understood their patience. She whispered, Fear doesn't need noise. It just needs presence. The orphan stood beside her, silent, watching the city breathe in anticipation. He didn't seek vengeance anymore. He sought correction. Then the first signal arrived. Not bullets, not threats, but a single encrypted broadcast. A black crown symbol appearing across networks they controlled. The message was clear, You are seen. The orphan didn't flinch. Elena's fingers danced over the keyboard. They want us to be afraid, she said. He replied. Then we show them who survives fear. Preparation began in shadows. Safe houses became hubs. Networks became webs of anticipation. They moved without sound, striking without mercy, but leaving no unnecessary blood. Every target they touched wasn't just punished, it was corrected. Every empire destabilized was a lesson in control. Elena studied the moves of the crown, the hidden council behind global operations. Every pattern they tried to enforce was already anticipated. Every plan they laid crumbled before it started. You taught me strategy, fear, and silence, the orphan said quietly one night. But Elena, you taught me calculation. That's the deadliest weapon of all. She didn't answer. She simply smiled. The crown tried to retaliate. Operatives appeared in the streets, encrypted threats infiltrated networks, and pressure mounted. But the orphan and Elena had already rewritten the rules. They struck first, not with violence but with information. Entire organizations fell without a single shot fired. Fear became systemic, controlled, precise. Those who tried to rise under the shadow of the crown were crushed before their ambition could take form. Through it all, the orphan's face remained unseen. Elena became the whisper in the networks, the architect of outcomes. Together, they were untouchable. Not because they were violent, but because they were predictable only to themselves. The city learned to respect silence. It learned that power can exist without headlines, that influence can be wielded without showing the hand, that fear is more potent when it's invisible. And somewhere in the shadows, watching over the city that would never admit it feared them, the orphan and Elena walked side by side. Not rulers, not kings, not ghosts. They were the measure of what survival can build. The warning the world didn't want to understand. Every night, The orphan looked at Elena and knew. No system could break them, because they had already mastered the one thing every empire feared most, the balance of darkness and control. And so the city breathed on, quietly, under the gaze of two figures who were no longer hunted. They were the hunters of the unseen, the architects of consequences. The world would continue to move, never knowing how close it had come to being rewritten, or how completely it had already been changed. The city's heartbeat felt different now. Even the neon lights seemed dimmer, as though sensing the new tension creeping into its veins. Streets that had once obeyed the unspoken rules of the orphan and Elena now seemed fragile, uncertain. Small factions began to whisper of Damien Crow, not in fear, not yet, but with curiosity. Curiosity often preceded chaos. Elena and the orphan moved like shadows through the city. Not through alleys, not through buildings, but through influence. Every network they controlled was watched, every silent message analyzed. Nothing could happen without their awareness. And yet Damien's presence was like a pulse, subtle but insistent, impossible to ignore. Elena, the orphan said one night as they observed a network of shell companies. He's watching patterns we can't see yet. He's anticipating moves before they're made. Elena didn't look up from the screens. Then we give him something unexpected. We move unpredictably. The first sign of him wasn't violence. It was precision. A minor faction attempted a takeover in a part of the city Elena had thought secure. The attempt failed, violently, but the precision of the strikes suggested Damien's hand. He didn't create chaos. He orchestrated it. Every action was calculated to teach them a lesson, to observe their responses. The orphan remained calm. He's intelligent, patient, dangerous. And patient men are always more dangerous than angry ones, Elena added. Over the next weeks, Damien escalated subtly. It started with whispers, encrypted messages left in impossible places, hints of surveillance in their safe houses, information leaks that destabilized small operations they had meticulously planned. One night, the orphan noticed a small anomaly. A single drone flying over the eastern district, disappearing before Elena could detect it. He's close, the orphan said quietly. Watching, learning, testing. Elena tilted her head, lips curling in a faint smirk. Then let's give him the lesson he didn't know he signed up for. They began a game of shadows. Elena manipulated networks to create false opportunities, carefully planted hints and traps within traps. Every move was a message: we see you. We know you. But can you see us? Damien responded in kind. For every false move they planted, he countered with his own subtle corrections. Small factions began to crumble in ways neither the orphan nor Elena predicted. It became clear. He wasn't a simple rival. He was a strategist of unparalleled skill. Someone who understood control and patience better than even Elena. One evening, the orphan and Elena stood on a rooftop overlooking the western district. The city lights shimmered through the rain, streets reflecting the glow like rivers of fire. Every time we move, he adapts, Elena said softly. And yet, he hasn't made his presence known directly. The orphan exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on a distant tower. He's waiting for the right moment. For us to make a mistake. Elena's fingers hovered over her tablet. Then we create the mistake, but only the illusion of it. We draw him out. They began a series of orchestrated maneuvers over the following days. Small, visible mistakes that weren't mistakes at all. Assets that appeared compromised were actually bait. False vulnerabilities were exposed. They tested Damien's responses, watching patterns emerge, learning his rhythm. And finally it happened. A single encrypted message appeared across every network Elena controlled. I see you. Always. The game begins. The orphan read it silently, then handed the device to Elena. He's here, he said. Finally. Elena's eyes darkened. Then we meet him on our terms. The following night they prepared. Safe houses were secured. Access points controlled. Observation drones placed where Damien could least anticipate. They didn't rush into confrontation, they never did. Control was their weapon, patience their ally. The location Damien revealed was a derelict industrial complex at the city's edge. High ceilings, rusted machinery, broken windows. Perfect for observation. Perfect for an encounter. They arrived without fanfare. No guns drawn, at least not yet. Their presence was measured, controlled, a silent signal to anyone who might be watching. The hunters have arrived. And Damien was waiting. Not with weapons, not with a crew, but with a calm that unnerved even Elena. Standing in the shadows, he watched them approach with a posture of absolute confidence, every detail precise. "You're careful," he said, voice smooth, deliberate. "I respect that." The orphan didn't answer. Silence was always a stronger response than words. Elena tilted her head slightly. "Why watch from afar when you can step into the light?" Damien smiled faintly. "Because the light reveals too much." The orphan studied him. Every movement, every word, every pause, it was a pattern, a strategy. And yet, the same patterns had weaknesses, and he intended to find them. The night stretched. Rain fell softly on broken steel roofs. The city beyond continued unaware, its pulse steady and blind. The three of them were alone in this silent arena, each calculating, each observing, each waiting for the other to make the first mistake. Then Damien moved. A single deliberate step, enough to signal intent. Elena mirrored him, calm, confident, a shadow next to the orphan. "You're not here to destroy me," Damien said. "Or at least not yet. You're here to prove you understand control." The orphan's jaw tightened. "We understand survival." "And survival," Damien said, "doesn't always mean winning immediately. Sometimes it means waiting for the world to make its own mistakes." Elena glanced at the orphan. "Then we let him wait too long." Over the next days, the confrontation became a game of intellect and observation. Damien left traces of influence, manipulating minor criminal factions, destabilizing supply lines, and creating confusion designed to draw Elena and the orphan out. Every move was countered, every trap avoided. But it became clear, Damien wasn't interested in immediate destruction. He wanted control. And control meant understanding the orphan and Elena fully, predicting their every move, learning their strategy, observing the balance between their instincts and their calculated actions. Elena began mapping patterns, tracing the invisible web Damien had spun across the city. Every slight error in timing, every miscalculated movement by his agents became a clue, slowly revealing the structure of his operations. The orphan remained patient, silent, letting Elena's intellect drive the observations. He didn't need to act. His presence alone altered the outcome of every situation. Then came the message that changed everything. "You understand nothing. Meet me where no one can see." It was not a threat. It was an invitation. They prepared again, moving with precision, eliminating every chance of being followed or observed. The abandoned observatory on the outskirts of the city was chosen, the highest point, far from surveillance, offering clear sightlines and perfect isolation. When they arrived, Damien was already there. Standing in the center, calm, assessing. The rain pattered on the glass dome above, creating a natural curtain of distortion. "You've learned a great deal," he said. "But learning is not understanding. Understanding is seeing the consequences before they happen." Elena's fingers rested lightly on her tablet. "Then show us your consequences." The orphan studied Damien. "We're not here to fight recklessly. We're here to measure what you are." Damien's smile deepened. "Then let the observation begin." 4 hours they moved silently across the dome, testing each other with small maneuvers, each assessing the other's timing, speed, and decision-making. The encounter was not violent. It was a dance of minds, a test of awareness, patience, and anticipation. By dawn, they all understood something crucial. Damien was formidable, precise, and intelligent, but he was predictable. Patterns always emerged eventually, even in the most patient strategist. The orphan and Elena withdrew that morning, not defeated, not victorious, but informed. They now knew their rival's capabilities, his methods, and his subtle weaknesses. The game had evolved, and the city continued to breathe, unaware that a new shadow now moved among the old ones, a rival as patient, dangerous, and calculated as the orphan and Elena themselves. The city had begun to pulse differently under their influence. Streets that once carried predictable dangers now carried uncertainty. Syndicates shifted, alliances broke quietly, and whispers of Damien Crow began circulating in the shadows. But even these whispers were carefully filtered. Most people had no idea what they were truly involved in. Elena and the orphan observed from above, blending into rooftops and darkened alleys. Their presence was unnoticed, but their influence stretched across the city. Every business deal, every underground transaction, every minor crime fell under their silent watch. "He's testing us constantly," Elena said one night, her eyes scanning lines of data across the tablet. "Every disruption, every anomaly, it's all him. He's teaching us to react, to overcommit." The orphan nodded, his gaze steady on the rain-slicked streets below. "Then we give him something he cannot predict. Not a trap, but an opportunity he doesn't know exists." Over the next days they planted subtle signs, controlled errors, and false leads. Financial inconsistencies, minor factional betrayals, hints of weakness, all meticulously orchestrated. Damien reacted instantly. Small conflicts emerged, supply lines faltered, but nothing that directly endangered them. "He believes he's testing us," Elena said. "But really we're testing him." The orphan's lips curved faintly. "And every test reveals a pattern. He's calculating, but even he leaves cracks." Then the message arrived. Simple, direct, almost casual. "You understand nothing. Meet me where no one can see." The orphan studied it silently. Elena's fingers hovered over her tablet, eyes sharp. "It's time," she said. "He wants a meeting." They moved through the city cautiously, every route secured, every observation point checked. The location Damien provided was an abandoned subway station at the city's edge, long forgotten by the public, buried beneath layers of rusted steel and crumbling concrete. They entered silently. The tunnels were dark, damp, echoing faintly with the sound of dripping water. "No cameras. No witnesses. The perfect arena." "You finally came," Damien said from the shadows, his voice calm, measured, deliberate. The orphan's stance was relaxed, every movement controlled. Elena mirrored him, poised, a shadow within the darkness. "You underestimate me," Damien continued. "You believe your actions dictate the city. But you are merely reacting." The orphan's response was quiet but unwavering. "We don't react. We observe, adapt, and act when necessary." Elena's lips curled into a faint, sharp smile. "And we endure. The city bends to those who survive." Damien's eyes flickered with interest. Then the observation begins. For hours they moved silently, testing each other's limits. Every gesture, every pause, every subtle shift was an attempt to gauge strength, patience, and reaction. No violence. No unnecessary risk. Just a battle of intellect, instinct, and control. By dawn, the encounter ended without conflict. Damien retreated, leaving only a single message. "Interesting. The game is just beginning." Elena exhaled slowly. "He's patient. He will wait for the perfect moment." The orphan nodded. "Then we let him wait. Patience is our ally." Over the next week, Damien's influence manifested more aggressively. Small syndicates he controlled began destabilizing minor operations the orphan and Elena had arranged. Each move was precise, subtle, almost invisible, yet calculated to exert pressure. Elena traced the patterns meticulously, noting every connection, every subtle irregularity. "Even the best strategist slips," she said quietly. The orphan studied her, his eyes dark. "Then we wait for that slip. And when it comes, we will be ready." Every day became a silent war. Operations were disrupted before they could take effect. Minor factions realigned under their manipulation. Damien's network, though formidable, began showing signs of human error. Patterns emerged and cracks widened, small at first, but noticeable to those who were patient enough to watch. They didn't strike directly. That wasn't necessary. They simply created the conditions for his overreach. And Damien, for all his intelligence, began to respond to pressure, subtly, cautiously, almost predictably. Finally, the opportunity arose. A mid-level syndicate, previously under Damien's influence, turned unexpectedly against him. It was not by their hand, but a result of the careful conditions the orphan and Elena had orchestrated. Damien's response was immediate, precise, but revealing. Every move, every command betrayed his patterns, his habits. Elena observed it all silently, noting weaknesses in communication, timing, and human reliability. He's too calculated to make a mistake, she whispered. Yet patterns always appear. The orphan's gaze hardened. And we'll exploit them. Not violently but strategically. We don't need blood yet. We need control. Days passed, tension building like the calm before a storm. Damien escalated, manipulating minor factions to create pressure points. Elena countered, stabilizing them subtly, maintaining their influence, all while observing Damien's responses carefully. Every interaction became a test of patience. Every reaction revealed new data. Every minor victory created subtle shifts in the balance of power. It was the most precise, calculated battle they had ever experienced. Not one single shot was fired openly. Yet the city was the board, and every move reshaped the underworld without anyone realizing it. Then a final signal. Meet me. Now. Alone. The orphan and Elena prepared for the first true confrontation. Every route planned. Every observation point secured. Every potential hazard accounted for. The location. A rooftop above a half-constructed skyscraper. Isolated. Overlooking the city below. Perfect for a silent test of wits and patience. Damien was already there, waiting in the shadow of a steel girder, rain soaking his coat. Calm. Confident. Silent. You've grown bolder, he said. But do you understand what you're up against? The orphan stepped forward. We understand that control is earned, not taken. Elena's gaze was sharp. And we endure. Patience, precision, observation, we have all three. Damien studied them both, his expression unreadable. Then let the real game begin. For hours they moved like shadows across the rooftop. Each step, each subtle maneuver was a test of observation, reaction, and instinct. Damien assessed their rhythm, their timing, and the interplay between them. Elena anticipated each subtle cue, countering silently, while the orphan observed Damien's patterns with the cold patience that had carried him through every past threat. No words were wasted. No unnecessary movements. Every gesture was calculated. Every pause measured. By dawn, Damien withdrew, leaving no trace but a single message. You are formidable. But so is the city. And I will not be denied. Elena and the orphan exchanged a glance. He's patient, Elena said. And he will wait for a mistake. The orphan nodded. Then we make him wait longer. The city below continued to breathe, unaware that three of its most dangerous shadows now danced around each other. Silent, patient, and deadly. The city slept beneath them, unaware that its streets were a chessboard, and three unseen players dictated every shadow and movement. Damien Crow had grown bolder. Subtle manipulations had escalated into strategic strikes, minor syndicates collapsing, supply lines disrupted, and alliances fracturing silently. Elena and the orphan observed from the rooftops, their movements precise, controlled, silent. Every ripple in the city's underworld was calculated. Every shift, every whisper, every anomaly was a message to be read. He's increasing the pressure, Elena said quietly, tracing lines on her tablet. Every move, every minor faction destabilized, it's all a test. The orphan's gaze was cold, fixed on the streets below. Then we turn the test into our advantage. We dictate the flow now, not react to it. Their first counterstrike was subtle, invisible to the untrained eye. Fictitious vulnerabilities planted weeks earlier were now exploited by them. They caused minor factions to act against Damien without realizing it. Small victories, seemingly random, began to unravel parts of his network. Damien noticed, of course. Every subtle shift was observed, every reaction recorded. But even he could not see all angles. His patience, as formidable as it was being tested against two minds operating in perfect synchrony. Elena smirked one night as she watched a faction collapse silently. He's learning too late. We're always one step ahead. The orphan nodded. Patience isn't passive. It's preparation. Then came the true escalation. Damien struck with a calculated precision that stunned even them. A major syndicate, previously under their influence, was sabotaged, triggering chaos that no casual observer could trace. Communications were jammed, key assets immobilized, and city operations subtly destabilized. Elena's fingers danced across her tablet. This is his first real strike. He wants to see how far we can bend before we break. The orphan's jaw tightened. Then we do not bend. We respond. Quietly, efficiently. And we strike at the unseen source. For days they analyzed, observed, and countered. Each minor attack was met with subtle precision. Damien's network revealed small cracks, predictable responses, human errors, nothing overt, but enough for those with patience to exploit. Finally, the confrontation became inevitable. The location, an unfinished skyscraper at the edge of the city, abandoned and towering, steel skeleton piercing the sky. Rain slicked the floors, wind howled through exposed girders, and the city's lights glimmered far below, a perfect stage for the final act. Damien was already there, waiting, standing amidst the steel like a figure carved from shadow itself. Calm, deliberate, and confident. "You've learned much," he said, voice echoing softly in the skeletal structure. "But do you truly understand the game?" The orphan stepped forward. "We understand it perfectly. The game isn't about aggression, it's about balance. And balance always favors the patient." Elena's hand rested lightly on her tablet. "And we endure. That's what makes us untouchable." Damien smiled faintly. "Then the question remains. Are you ready to play without the shadows to hide behind?" The orphan met his gaze steadily. "We have never relied on shadows. We have always been the ones shaping them." The next hours were a silent duel of intellect, instinct, and observation. No weapons were drawn openly. Every movement was calculated. Every step measured. Damien tested their reactions, probing, pushing, forcing small decisions that revealed weaknesses. The orphan anticipated, countered, adapted. Elena manipulated the environment subtly, controlling lighting, observation points, and access routes, tilting the unseen battlefield in their favor. Rain streaked the steel girders, creating a natural curtain. Shadows danced across the walls. Every echo, every gust of wind, was weaponized psychologically, a silent reminder of the stakes. By dawn, Damien paused. He had learned much, but so had they. "You are formidable," he said finally. "I underestimated your patience, your coordination." The orphan's lips curved faintly. "And you underestimated our understanding of control. You calculate, but you do not endure. Patience wins where aggression fails." Elena's gaze was unwavering. The city belongs to no one. But those who survive and adapt shape it. Damien's expression shifted. Respect mingled with calculation. He nodded slowly. "Perhaps this is not the end. But know this. The next move, the true test, is still coming." The orphan and Elena watched him disappear into the rain-soaked streets below, a shadow retreating into the depths of the city. Weeks passed. The orphan and Elena rebuilt and reinforced their networks. Minor factions realigned under their control. Supply lines were restored. Alliances that had faltered were stabilized. The city returned to a tense equilibrium. But now, both of them carried a new awareness. Damien Crow was not just a rival. He was a force that would continue to shape the shadows, a predator patient enough to wait, smart enough to learn, and relentless enough to challenge them again. Yet, for the first time in years, the orphan felt something close to satisfaction. Not victory, not peace, but clarity. He had faced someone who matched his patience, intelligence, and precision. And he had endured. Elena stood beside him on a rooftop, watching the city awaken beneath the first light of dawn. "He will come again," she said quietly. The orphan nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "And next time, we will be ready, not just to survive, but to dominate the space he cannot see." She placed her hand on his shoulder. "Then we continue. Together." The city stirred beneath them, oblivious to the battles waged in shadows. Factions fell, alliances shifted, power was quietly claimed. And high above, two figures moved through the darkness with purpose, patience, and a bond forged in survival and strategy. The world would continue unaware. The orphan and Elena were no longer hunted. They were the architects of consequences, masters of unseen influence, and the calm force behind the city's restless heartbeat. And somewhere in the shadows, Damien Crow waited, calculating his next move, knowing that the orphan and Elena had survived the first test. But for now, the city belonged to them, Silent, powerful, and untouchable. The end.